In this video, I want to show you a great way to end your novel, one that embodies both tragedy and triumph, and makes the reader punch the air with joy. Now, to demonstrate how it works, I'm going to imagine a movie about the life of the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, with Jack Nicholson playing Shelley. And we will draw heavily on the ending of that wonderful movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think I may be the first literary historian to spot the uncanny similarities between Shelley and Jack Nicholson. So welcome to another instalment in my series on how to write your novel using that most unlikely of writing implements, a round Oxford bus ticket. Conventionally, it seems to me there are three obvious ways of ending: happy, sad, and ambiguous. But I want to write one that combines elements of all three. In my previous video, I talked about an emotion, a surging exultancy in the heart that I called upliftium. And I want to use some upliftium in the ending to our movie. For inspiration, we're taking the bus to the high street, heading for University College, Oxford. Specifically, we're looking for the Shelley Memorial, which houses this statue of Shelley. At first glance, you might be surprised by my linking Shelley and Jack Nicholson, but this memorial provides us with a clue why. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is set in a mental institution, and Jack Nicholson plays a convict, Randall P. McMurphy, who arrives at the institution. He immediately establishes his credentials as a rebel or outsider by clashing with the tyrannical and oppressive head of the ward, Nurse Ratched. The movie is essentially a battle of wills between the two, fighting over the souls of the other inmates. To give you an idea of McMurphy's character, he was convicted by a court and sentenced to 60 days on a prison farm, but feigned insanity so he could spend his sentence in the hospital, assuming it would be easier than working on a chain gang. Shelley did something that many regarded as pretty nuts during his first year at Oxford. He wrote a pamphlet entitled The Necessity of Atheism, and mailed it to the bishops and heads of the Oxford colleges. And even today that would be provocative. But back then let's say it was asking for trouble, and he got it. The college authorities expelled him. Now this statue, unveiled some 70 years later, suggests the college realized that by expelling one of the greatest poets who ever lived, they might have goofed up. The pamphlet on atheism was a prelude to a life spent clashing with authority and social norms. After his expulsion, his father disowned him and cut off his income, so he eloped to Scotland with 16-year-old Harriet Westbrook and married her, much to his father's annoyance. A few years later, he abandoned Harriet, leaving her with one child and expecting another, and then eloped to Europe with another 16-year-old girl, Mary Godwin. The abandoned Harriet, pregnant with his child, later took her own life in the Serpentine Lake in Hyde Park, London. Now Shelley, the son of a baronet and MP, lived in the public gaze, and his conduct was considered scandalous. He also engaged in political activism, agitating for Irish independence, another move unlikely to endear him to the establishment. His views were deemed subversive by the Home Secretary. And in addition to atheism and Irish republicanism, he was an advocate of non-violence and, perhaps most scandalously of all, a vegetarian. Seems to have been about 200 years ahead of his time. In One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, McMurphy's spirit of rebellion is symbolized by the massive hydrotherapy control panel that he attempts to lift and throw through a window, and he fails initially. If there's a metaphorical equivalent in Shelley's life, it is his attempt to overthrow the massive edifice of stifling Victorian hypocrisy. Perhaps his most shocking project was his espousal of free love. He called chastity outside marriage a monkish and evangelical superstition, and that led to hypocrisy and prostitution and promiscuity, a sentiment that many probably agreed with but dared not say. And due to the opprobrium that dogged him, Shelley never received the recognition his work deserved in his lifetime, and he spent much of his time exiled in Europe, running away from his creditors. Now this larger-than-life biography is a feast for constructing a movie, but we're more concerned here with how to end it. Shelley died in a boating accident off the Ligurian coast in 1822. His boat sank during a sudden storm, and 10 days later his body was washed ashore, so badly decomposed that it was identified only by a copy of Keats's poems in the pocket. But not everyone believed it was a simple drowning. In the months before, Shelley reported disturbing visions and premonitions, including recurring nightmares of drowning. True to form, he'd been agitating for Italian independence and making powerful enemies. Some people claimed there were threats made against his life, and Trelawney, a close friend who examined the boat after it was washed ashore, suggested it had been struck by another vessel. Could he have been murdered? Or is the truth even stranger? A clue comes from the strange event at the unveiling of Shelley's statue 70 years later. A wild-eyed hermit turned up, causing a disturbance. He shouted accusations at the officials and claimed to have been present at the sinking of the boat. Now, my One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest ending hinges on this man, and I'll tell you more about him after this short commercial break. And if you find these videos helpful, please like and subscribe. I remember the time of my death precisely. It was 6:29, 5 hours after the freight train hit me. I found myself in the ambulance floating above my body and looking down. I entered a shining tunnel of light. At the top, 2 spirit guides waited. "Son of Adam," said one, "we have come to conduct you to the Valley of Infinite Bliss. Just give us the title of your novel." "But I haven't written one. I was going to, but—" "What? You haven't written one? Then you must go back to your body straight away." "But it's been hit by a freight train." "Off you go, off you go." There was a bright flash, and I found myself once more in my shattered body. Don't let this happen to you. Get Gateway to Narnia, your free 10-part email course on how to write your novel. Gateway to Narnia. The link is in the description below. Now, before we examine the stranger, let's revisit One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Now, Shelley's death seems very sad. Alone, exiled, unrecognised. And in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, McMurphy similarly fails. He assaults Nurse Ratched, giving her the excuse to crush him. They sedate him and lobotomise him, and he returns to the ward as a zombie. Now, Chief Bromden, his devoted friend, looks on in horror at what remains of McMurphy, and he smothers him with a pillow. McMurphy is dead. Everything he stood for is lost. Or is it? Because Chief Bromden walks to the hydrotherapy panel and with a Herculean effort he lifts it, smashes it through the window and escapes. It's one of the cinema's most triumphant moments. McMurphy's body is gone, but his spirit lives on. So how do you apply this to Shelley? Well, the clue comes from the detail attested to by history that after 2 weeks in the sea, Shelley's body was too badly decomposed to be recognisable. I found that hard to believe. What if there was a different explanation? What if, as a result of his political agitation, the threats to Shelley's life were real? He was in grave mortal danger. What if he faked his death? They obtained an unrecognisable body from a corrupt mortician, stuck a copy of Keats's poems in the pocket, nice touch, and he invents a load of premonitions about his death. Well, his death achieves a number of desirable things. It means the assassins are no longer trying to kill him, and it enables him to return to England without fearing his creditors. And his reputation as a poet begins to soar. It's something that happens quite often when people die. Before long, he becomes regarded as one of English literature's giants. A remarkable rehabilitation that culminates in the unveiling of the statue. Which brings us to the wild stranger. As the Chancellor gives his speech about how wonderful Shelley was, the man at the back shouts out and calls him a hypocrite and a Philistine. He said he was present at the sinking of the boat and distinctly remembered Shelley saying the college authorities were odious popinjays. Well, there is an uproar and the stranger is escorted from the building. Who was he? Why, it's Shelley, of course, returned from faking his death to tell the folk from the college what he thought of them. Okay, I admit the accounts of the statue unveiling do not mention this crazed loon turning up. I invented that detail. But the rest, the death threats, the premonitions, the disfigured corpse with a copy of Keats's poems in the pocket, are all true. So you never know, do you? Is it as magnificent an ending as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? No, that's because few things could be. But it's not bad, is it? And I think it would do well on Netflix. And before anybody moans, I know he would have been 101 at the time. But why not? More like Italian sunshine and cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil. He could easily have lived to a ripe old age. And if you want a memorial statue to you, don't forget to download Gateway to Narnia.